that you? Do you like scary urban legends? Are you fascinated with history and ghostly lore of haunted places? Well, if you answered yes to any of these, please check out Hauntingly Yours, a podcast for the paranormal. I'm your host, DC O'Rourke. I invite you to get together with me and the rest of our para family each and every week to hear haunting tales from across the globe. The show is available on all podcast players. Please do not forget to review and subscribe.
Today I have Eric Freeman Sims, the host of Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Eric's also a paranormal investigator and researcher. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I've been following you for quite a while. You've been in my playlist for a year. I mean, we kind of relate a little bit on our podcast, because we both do everything. I mean, from Bigfoot to UFOs to ghosts. I mean, there's some podcasts out there that just focus on the spirit world or ghosts. They don't get into the UFOs or Bigfoot or.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I stole one of your guests off your podcast, Warren of Juice.
Evidence of Extraterrestrials.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And I just happened upon him on Amazon and I've been looking for the right UFO person because I don't do conspiracy theories, don't have any interest in doing conspiracy theories on my show.
Uh-huh.
And I just happened upon his book and read it and loved the layout of it and the way that he researched all of it. And it's very, evidence science based and he came at it from a very good standpoint. And I had been looking for a good majority of my first season for a good extraterrestrial person to come on and found him. And yeah, he's a great guest. And I saw today his book is number 10 on Amazon. So I'm happy for him that he's kind of making the rounds and I kind of helped him start that off.
Yes, you did. That was right. I got some good feedback on him also. It was, like the research he does, it's thorough and just don't put out third party hearsay,
Right.
And that's what I really dig about like you and DC O'Rourke and Miranda Young, because you guys, you take pride in what you do and you honor the building or the person you're researching.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been to other buildings and with other paranormal investigators where everybody's up on each other's feet. It's not surprising that they're not getting nothing,
Yeah. I've never been the type of investigator to go in and provoke, because I believe that a good majority of the spirit world, if you're going in looking to communicate with these people that were once people too, that provoking is not going to get you anywhere. And I've heard also throughout the years, I've heard so many horror stories from different investigators who've gone in and provoked and had bad things happen to them. And it might not even be at the location. It might be in their personal life. And so I think what you put out there is what you get back. And I think your intention when you're going in, I think is a lot, does a lot for the investigation and for the communication with getting EVPs or video. And I think the spirits are more likely to want to communicate with you when you come in out of respect.
Yeah. And I also believe that the spirit will contact who they want to contact with.
Right.
Do you use trigger items?
Sometimes it depends on the location. I'm big into, of course, I've been a researcher too. So I'm big into doing the research on the location. Some people don't like to do research before they go in. I think it's very important to know the history and the research of a place that you're investigating, because it's going to help you understand, for one, who you're talking to and how to talk to them. And also, trigger objects, music, different things like that. Yeah, it just depends on location.
Well, what got you interested in the paranormal in the first place?
So for whatever reason, when I was a kid, for as long as I can remember, I was always fascinated by aliens and always had alien posters on my walls in my room. And then when I was 8 years old, I saw a full body apparition. I was asleep in the bed and I woke up and sat straight up in the bed, looked at my door. My door was open. There was a glowing lady standing in the doorway. And so I jumped up. It scared me because I'm 8, jumped up, flipped the light on. She disappeared. I slammed the door. And so then I've just kind of had experiences my entire life. And then when I was 14, my father passed away. And that just kind of thrust me more into wanting to know, what's beyond us and trying to figure out how to find that out. And so me and my friends, and this is back in the 90s before any of the TV shows, or I didn't even know much about even ghost hunters existing, let alone watching them on TV. But me and my friends would go out to cemeteries and some other locations that we had heard stories about just growing up in the area around Nashville where I live. And there was one location in Franklin, Tennessee. I don't condone trespassing, but we used to sneak on the property of this plantation house in Franklin, Tennessee, and we used to see stuff and have experiences. And so it just kind of fueled that. But yeah, my father dying kind of really was the catalyst to get me into really diving into it, especially ghosts is what it started out. And then I just kind of, I've branched off doing research and trying to learn everything I can about everything in the field. And then I started investigating with the team, and I started my podcast. Was it last July 2020? And it's going really well, but working on a book. So yeah, it's just kind of snowballed over the years. And then of course, back when Ghost Hunters, came out, I was just amazed that we were already doing some of the same stuff they were doing. And then we started copying them. And so I've just, learned over the years from trial and error for one. And then also you start out by mimicking what you see on TV, and then you find out, well, that's not necessarily how you should do things, depending on the show. But yeah, the catalyst was kind of when my father passed away.
Hey, you said you're starting a book. What's the book about?
It is going to be titled Small Town Haunts and Legends of Tennessee. I mean, if you live in Tennessee, you kind of hear depending on what area you live in, but you hear about all the bigger haunts like the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville. And there's lots of places in Memphis, BG Theater in Memphis, Chattanooga. You got Shiloh Battlefield in West Tennessee. You got Chickamauga. And you got all these places that you hear all these stories. But nobody ever hears the small town stories. So I kind of wanted to go across the state and focus on some of the smaller towns and the local legends and local folklore and ghost lore. And some of those, and a lot of those little towns have interesting history as well. So I'm throwing a little history in there too.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm writing a book myself. Mine's on growing up in a haunted house when I was about 13 years old. So I've never seen a ghost myself until, 13, because you're always taught ghosts don't exist or, all that, So I was a non-believer until we moved into this one house. And so I'm writing a book on the 4 years we were in this house. And I had a guest on last night, and she was telling me about her experience in her house. And I was just sitting back, like I was just kind of like in awe of what she was talking about. And she says, "Are you still there?" And I'm like, yeah, but it reminded me a lot of what happened to me, what she was talking about. And I think like yourself, when you go investigate, you'll find out even small towns, big towns, Australia, Chicago, Tennessee. I mean, it's everywhere.
Right.
That's cool that you can go to the smaller places that have hauntings in the building.
Yeah. And with starting my podcast last year, that was kind of the intent, was to not, and I have people from TV and in the paranormal world that have interesting stories, but I still like to focus on some of these smaller, lesser known locations and even have, individual paranormal teams on, because I think their stories are just as interesting just because they're not on TV and it's not Waverly Hills or some big place like that, Madison Seminary, or one of those big places that you see on TV all the time. Just because they haven't been picked up by the Discovery Channel or History Channel to do a show there doesn't mean that history is not important and they don't have a interesting story to tell. And so, that's what I kind of built my show on. And I still do that. I'll still, I've got upcoming shows. I've been doing season 2 now, and a lot of the guests, I've got quite a few from TV and got some reoccurring guests from last season, but yeah, a lot of my guests will be from those smaller locations. That's why I like Dr. Chris Sumner and Miranda Young, like you had mentioned them before, because they're all about the history and those lesser known locations as well.
That's really important, because I'm just like I say, around this area, my area, northeastern Ohio, it has a lot of active places. And when I go there, or if I go investigate, what I was finding when I was doing it before, back in the 90s in my area, and I go there and I'm not getting nothing. Spirit box, nothing. Infrared cameras. It's when I turned the stuff off, like I was getting pushed or flicked or, it was stuff like that, and you look around, there's nothing there. It's hard to explain to people that haven't witnessed that, and everybody wants to see the evidence,
Yeah.
It's cool that you do the research on these places. That is important, to know the background on the place that you're investigating.
Yeah. And I think I quit doing private investigations a long time ago. Just it's a lot to deal with going into somebody's home, and there's big expectations there for you to to fix them or help them. So now with the team that I just guest investigate on, so I can pick and choose, where I go and what I want to do. But I've kind of slowly gotten out of investigating a lot and doing more research, and I'm having more fun now with the podcast, because it's kind of, with the investigations, it's kind of like I've been there, done that. I've done it many, many times and been in many locations, and the stories tend to be a lot similar. Don't get me wrong, some places are just interesting. Like I've never investigated an opera house, so we're doing an opera house at the end of November. So that'll be a cool experience. So I like those experiences of investigating places now that I've never been to before, that type of building or whatever. Actually, this coming Friday, I'm doing a Montessori school. Yeah, so now I'm more into the places that I've never been. But yeah, I can understand, like you were saying, a lot of times when you have all that equipment and when you're changing batteries or you're not recording, that's when stuff happens. It's the personal experiences that you can't prove to people, that, at least for me, that prove to me, that the paranormal exists. And so I've been touched and things like that, but it's never been on camera. You can't, there's no way to put that across on audio or on camera. People just have to take my word for it.
Right.
And so I think that's a big thing that people don't understand, is that you can't always I can put that story out there, but some people believe it, some people won't. You're not always going to get the apparition on the camera or these great EVPs and that type of stuff. But yeah, I've had a lot of stuff happen not on camera, like you're saying, when you turn the stuff off. But it's also one of those things where you can have 10 people in the same room and a apparition can pop up right in front of you, and all 10 people will have a completely different experience and describe it. Yeah, and that's what makes the stories, even if they're similar, that's what makes all these different stories interesting to hear and to listen to.
Have you ever maybe considered that if you're contacting a spirit from, say, the 1500s, that they didn't know nothing about EVPs, or
right?
So maybe it's because after everything's off, then again they can adapt too after all those years.
Yeah, I've had it put to me before, because we're always asking the spirits to speak into the light, the little red light or green light on the recorder, or come touch this device that lights up. Well, maybe back in their time, if they touched anything that was lighting up, it would burn them, because they had candles and lanterns and fire and that type of stuff, and they weren't aware of electricity like we have now and that type of stuff. So some of them, yeah, they might be scared to come touch your device because it lights up. Miranda Young, when I had her on my show, when we were talking, she brought up a good point as well. Who's to say that they can see color the way we do? So when you say go touch the green light, maybe they don't see green, maybe it's monochrome for them, or maybe it's a different color light, or they see in a different spectrum. We just think as humans, because of the way that we see, that there's not more to the world, when there's so many spectrums of light that we can't even see with our own eyes. We just take in, the UV spectrum and not the infrared. And that's why we use these cameras, infrared spectrum, thermal spectrum, and all these other different, and also that the same goes for sound. We only hear in a limited spectrum of the wavelength of sound. And so you go outside of that, some animals use it, like whales use infrasound, and dolphins with the echolocation and that type of stuff. And there's a component there that we can hear, but there's a huge component that we can't hear of that stuff. Yeah, you just kind of got to think outside of your own senses.
Right, it's like a dog can hear that dog whistle, but a human ear can't hear it.
Right.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I agree with that. I want to get on a few of these episodes I listened to on your podcast.
Yeah.
Recent one was the Holmes County in Ohio.
Yeah.
And I got into that because I'm only like 2 counties away from Holmes County, and I was there yesterday. So, actually 2 days, and we had a good time. My wife and I. The gentleman on there, was it Patrick Meechan?
Patrick Meechan, yeah.
Man, I tell you what, he hit the nail on the head, because the last time I've been to Holmes County, it's changed quite a bit as far as what the Amish do now. I didn't, before there wasn't so many riding a tractor. I'm at a gas station, and Amish pulls up next to me on his other side of the pump on his tractor, filling his tractor up. And I told my wife, that's strange, And then you go through town, and probably out of 200 some Amish I seen had battery packs on their bicycles, so they can get around without pedaling. I'm like, or go up a hill a lot better. That's different, got into what he was saying about that house. And, you know, if you're English moving into the Amish community, they kind of frown on that. And with that house, because I think there's a lot of activity in the Amish community as far as ghosts and spirits.
Yeah. And in his book, he goes a lot more in depth, of course, than we had time for in the hour that we talked. And also, you know, the point is for people to go read his book as well. But in his book, he goes a lot more in depth of a lot of things that the Amish did to him far beyond what he told on the show.
Uh-huh.
And from the get-go, they did not want him to buy this land. This land was in between two Amish families. This property was. And the one that he believes cursed him, the one that he was talking about is teaching the church witchcraft or, you know, whatever in the church. That guy wanted his son to have that land to build a house on, and so that he would be in the farm next door. And so that's kind of what snowballed all of that into existence. And he told the story about the younger Amish gentleman who said he saw the guy in the bushes. He goes a little more in depth into the book, and he believes that was between two things. Either they'd already conjured a demon type creature, or that was somebody staking out his house to do some sort of hex on it. And yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there. And they did he called the cops on them many times for trespassing on his property, because they would go through his property to get from one house to another.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't know that they have their own banking system, you know, within the community.
Right.
And, you know, once they get a hold of your house, you know, they don't want you going through the realtor or paying full price for the house. They want to go to auction so they can get it below dirt cheap price and keep it in the Amish community. But I really got into his conversation on Holmes County and his experiences inside the house. And yeah, I ordered his book off you, you know, because he was on your show. And so I really dug that, you know. The other one I liked was you had a while back was, I forget the name of the podcast. It was, you had planes that crashed into just like the Smoky Mountains.
Oh yeah, Steve Stockton, the National Park Mysteries and Disappearances.
That was a while back when I listened to that one, but I couldn't think of the name, and I didn't have time to research it. But I was like, that one too grabbed my attention because, you know, I've been to Smokies quite a few times on Pigeon Forge, and yeah, and I can see that happening. You know, these I never thought about that. You know, how many planes actually are lost in that area.
Yeah. The weird thing was when I put that episode out, I did not correlate this at all. The episode came out the same week that I went on a vacation to Gatlinburg. And so that Wednesday, the episode came out, and that weekend following that Wednesday, I was in Gatlinburg all weekend. So it was kind of interesting having that kind of fresh in my mind and going out there. And I had been to Gatlinburg quite a few times living in middle Tennessee. So, you know, it's only like 3-4 hour drive, but I had never dove into, you know, all the weird stuff going on out there. And with it being the most visited national park in the whole country, you're going to have those strange things, you know, strange disappearances and that type of stuff. And Steve, he just put out his second book, and his second book's about California. But yeah, he's a great guest and a wealth full of knowledge, and he's from that area. But yeah, diving into the plane crashes and the people missing, yeah, it's very fascinating.
I mean, people go on those trails, you know, they don't come back out.
Yeah,
you know, that's another part of it. You know, I don't know if that's in the book or not, but
he's got quite a few disappearances in there. One of the biggest ones is the Dennis Martin case, which happened back in the late 50s, early 60s, and it was a 5-year-old little boy that went missing, and they never found a trace of him. I think they found a shoe print. They found 2 footprints. One was of a shoe that was similar style to what the kid was wearing, and then it was a bare footprint right next to it, and that's the only trace they ever found of him. There was a report of another family that was further down the mountain hiking on a trail, and they were looking for bears. And one of the kids in the family told his dad, "Look up on that ridge, there's a bear." And the father looked up there, and he said it didn't look like a bear. He described it more like a Bigfoot, and it was carrying something over its shoulder, something brightly colored over its shoulder. And he reported that to the FBI because they were part of the, which is weird because the FBI doesn't do missing persons like that unless it crosses state lines. But they were there for that case, and they've been there for other missing 411 type cases. But so, could Bigfoot have snatched the kid?
A year ago, I had a guest on that was a Bigfoot investigator, and he brought up a really good question to me. That kind of floored me at the time was, did I think that Bigfoot and or UFOs were connected?
Yeah.
I didn't know how to answer that at the time. I think I don't know, I never really thought about that,
Yeah, I've talked to people kind of in both camps. I had a gentleman named Matt Pruitt on who actually lives in Nashville, and he's done the majority of his Bigfoot research, and he's with the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. And but he's done the majority of his research kind of in southeastern Tennessee, northern Georgia, that part of the Appalachian Mountains. But the North American Wood Ape Conservancy believes that it is just a primate that hasn't been discovered. And he made a lot of good points, but I've also had a few other guests on that we've kind of talked about Bigfoot in a, not necessarily an alien way, but a supernatural way.
Mm-hmm.
That there are some things that people report to where, yeah, Bigfoot is maybe from a different plane of existence. And it's when, the two dimensions kind of cross over. Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about it. I kind of lean, for me, just talking to people and researching it, I kind of lean towards Bigfoot just being a primate we haven't discovered.
I haven't really done too many on Bigfoot. I'd like to do more next year. But I came across one of your, I don't know if it was on an episode or you just updated it, the 3-finger Azca alien mummies.
That was the article that I shared on Facebook the other day. Yeah, they kind of disappeared for a while. Now they've shown back up. They discovered them. It's like 2 different alien species, is what they think, because one of them was only like 6 inches tall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've done more research on that, and so yeah, it's pretty interesting that that's kind of caught the mainstream media again.
Yeah, I just reading on it. I was like, I never heard about that one, and that was very interesting. With it, they had 3 fingers, 3 toes, and the women had the eggs out, on the outside their body. And they actually did some DNA testing on those eggs.
There's some people out there that think that maybe aliens came, interdimensional beings came and kind of messed with the DNA of primates, and that's how you got humans. And that's always been an interesting, intriguing theory to me, because I could see that being possible in a certain way, especially the way the tree branches of what we're finding out with different, species of humanoids. And they just found a new one the other day that they found out was a completely different sapien species that walked upright and has completely different DNA than humans or like Homo erectus or Cro-Magnon man, any of those on the tree.
I was reading that the DNA showed that they were not human and they were not mammal bones. So do you think they could take that DNA and reproduce it?
I don't know. I don't know what the capabilities would be.
A while back, when they were doing fossilized DNA on these dinosaurs, and they were talking, some show I was watching that they could reproduce that DNA in a test tube. And I'm like, wouldn't that be interesting? You had all these little T-Rexes running around New York City, But right. I was reading that and I was thinking about that, when they were extracting that DNA from these bones.
I think the problem that they're having with the only animal I've heard of that they're trying to recreate and they think they have enough DNA material would be the woolly mammoth. And that's because they have enough in common with the modern one of the species of elephants that still live on the planet, that they can implant that DNA. And because you have to have kind of 2 DNAs come together to recreate an animal, where the sperm and the egg kind of come together with the 2 different DNAs. So, yeah, from what I've seen, the only animal that they've got that where they can put it in a elephant embryo is the woolly mammoth.
Yeah, it seems to me like you would need both sexes. But, what was interesting was the Peruvian government is now interested in the 3-finger mummies. It's like, where you been all this time?
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of took them over as a national antiquity. Yeah.
And it kind of reminded me of the U.S. government with the UFOs. They take an interest when the public's outraged over all these sightings, nobody's doing anything about it. You would question, like Warren Jew said, these UFOs are over our nuclear sites.
Right.
And you would think you would put more of an effort to, check that out. I mean, it's national security,
Yeah. Well, I think our government doesn't tell us anything,
Mhm.
and that report was a bunch of BS.
I thought it was, one finding, and it was weather balloon.
Right. Yeah, and one of the things, I was on Andrea Perron's show a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the alien phenomena, and she asked me what I thought of the disclosure and the 140 something videos. And I think that out of the 140 something videos, I think the majority of them, like with the Tic Tacs and all that stuff, I don't think they know. I really don't think they know. But there was one statement in the report they put out that said, we also know that China and Russia don't have this technology. So how can you put a declarative statement out that they don't have this technology if we weren't running some like tiny piece of the technology that we got from somewhere else? You know what I'm saying? From a downed alien craft or something like that. How could you put out a statement like that to where it made me think maybe a couple of those videos out of the 140 something that they supposedly looked into, maybe a couple of those were actually drone technology that we have that, we for sure through espionage or whatever know that China and Russia doesn't have.
Well, another thing too, it's like, not only what Warren you said, but what our own pilots are saying that were there chasing these things.
Yeah.
They can go from 20,000 feet down to ocean level in 1 second.
Yeah.
I don't think, like Warren says, there's no human could survive that.
Our military, they mainly use drones now to do bombings and stuff. I mean, we still have fighter jets and all that. But also, if you think about the technology, whenever you think, what is our most modern technology? We think of like the stealth fighter and the big B-2 bomber, that technology, but that technology is 30 years old. The government hasn't really come out and said we have this technology now. So what have they developed in 30 years? Because when they showed the stealth bomber and that technology and finally brought it out to the public, it was already 15 years old. And so what have they developed that we don't know that they have now? But like you're saying, no human could survive that. But what about a drone?
Yeah. Do you think a drone could go that fast though? I mean, that's what.
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on if you believe that we've recovered alien technology. If you listen to some people like Bob Lazar, who has kept his story pretty much the same over the years, which would be hard to do if you're lying, of reverse engineering alien technology from crashes, we could have that technology.
Just like Roswell, it wasn't that crazy farmer that came out and said, hey, I got this, and this on aliens and space crazy. It was a government. It was the United States Air Force that came out and
right. And then the next day they backpedaled. And one of the other things that I find very interesting, and I don't necessarily believe him, is Luis Elizondo. So he's the head of this program ATIP, and then all of a sudden he just decides to retire and basically defect to start preaching all this disclosure, kind of become the spokesperson for this whole movement. But our government's done disinformation campaigns for as long as they've been around. So why wouldn't he be a plant to do? And also, he won't talk about certain things because his answer is always, from multiple interviews I've seen him, his answer is always, well, I still want to keep my security clearance.
Right.
Well, why do you need your security clearance if you're retired and you're not planning on going back into the military? Why don't you just tell what you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I do understand that the government has to keep some things top secret. We don't need to know certain things or you would have a public panic.
Right. Yeah. I recorded a show with the guest the other day, and his episode will be out here in a couple of weeks, but his name's Von Brashler, and he's written extensively about time slips and time shifts and that type of phenomenon. We kind of got into a little bit of discussion about UFOs and the Tic Tacs and that type of stuff. And he put forth the theory that maybe they're using, some sort of small black holes or a time slip or time shift to move that fast and to disappear and reappear somewhere else. And I thought that was pretty interesting.
I love your theme song, man.
Thank you. That's a friend of mine. I've been friends with him for years. He used to be married to my cousin when I was a teenager, and I started out doing live sound for his band. And he was a great singer, great songwriter. And when I started my show, I just hit him up and I was like, this one song of yours is the perfect song for my show. And he gave me permission to use it.
Cool. That's awesome, man. So when's your book going to come out? You have any idea?
I don't. I'm in the middle of working on it now. I was hoping, because I've been working on it for a little while now. I'm kind of like you. It's the most difficult creative thing I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And I have ADD, so it's very hard for me to make myself sit down and collect all of this research and these thoughts and put it into a narrative form. But hopefully, I wanted to have it out by Halloween, but it's looking like probably the first of next year.
Yeah, I was thinking it too. I wanted mine out by Halloween. That was my goal. And it's looking like maybe spring of next year. Because you have to really plan for your release too.
Right. I'm going to do Kindle and paperback through Amazon, but I've actually had quite a few people tell me that because of my voice, I get comments on my voice all the time, that I should do an audiobook and narrate it myself. So I might look into doing that as well. I talked to my buddy Steve Stockton, who I've had on the show quite a few times, but he's got like 4 books out, and I talked to him about the audiobook stuff, and he told me that it just what Audible wants for an audiobook, he's like, it's just easier for somebody else to do it, because he has one of those deep, raspy voices, and people love his voice. He has a YouTube channel that he does lots of stuff on and narrates, and he's just like, it was just too much, because they want everything specifically this way and that way in this format, and he said it was just easier to let somebody else do it who does it for a living.
I think your voice would probably be good for your book, because you know what it's about and how to present it, and plus I sometimes I listen to an audiobook, it turns me off from the book. I don't even hear it anymore because I can't stand the girl's voice, or it's like, man, you could get somebody better.
Yeah.
But so what do you got coming up?
I've been good this season. Last season, I kind of my first season I kind of did on the fly a little more, where I'd record on Monday and put the episode out on Wednesday. I'm a good 7-8 episodes ahead, and I'm kind of staying that way. So I've been busy with doing lots of different interviews. But I've got, this week is Nash Hoover. He's a awesome younger kid in his early 20s. He does a show on YouTube called Chasing Legends, and it's a very professionally produced show, and they go around and investigate all these different cryptid legends around the world. He's a great guest. Up and comer kind of in the cryptozoology world. And then I have a lady by the name of Martha Decker. We talked about the Hill House in Mineral Springs, Texas, and the hauntings there. She's got a book out about that. I've got Adam Benedict, he's got a couple books out, and I thought his books are really interesting. That's why I wanted to have him on. His research into cryptids and things of that. He's got a book out about cryptids. He's got a book out about ghosts. But he dives into the old newspaper articles to bring these stories to light. And so he writes about Bigfoot and stuff in the cryptid book, but it's called something different, because it was a lot of the stories that were in the newspapers were before we had the terms Bigfoot or Sasquatch were kind of popular culture. So it kind of is regional.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he was a great guest to talk to. And then, like I was talking about, Von Brashler talking about time slips. I really enjoyed that. I've been into time slips here lately for some reason, but yeah, he's a really interesting guy to talk to about time slips and tell some great stories of things that happened to him, time slip, time shift wise, and some of the stories that he put in his book.
Well, Eric, it's been a pleasure having you on today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed it.
I want to thank Eric Sims for being on the show today. I've been a follower of his for quite a while now. It was truly my pleasure having him on. I will have his links at the bottom of this podcast. Please go to Apple, rate and review Ghosts in the Valley podcast, and also rate and review the Unseen Paranormal podcast as well. I know Eric would appreciate that also. I'm your host, Al Cooley, Ghosts in the Valley podcast.